The South Atlantic was cold and unforgiving that morning. A low gray sky pressed down on the sea, and the waves rolled like sheets of steel beneath the wind. Just a few meters above that surface, 4 aging attack jets raced forward, the engines screaming as they skimmed the water at a height where a single mistake meant death. Inside those cockpits, there were no advanced sensors, no digital displays offering reassurance. Only speed, discipline, and the thin hope that flying lower than anyone thought possible might be enough. This was not a mission designed for survival. It was designed for necessity. Far ahead, 2 British warships stood guard, symbols of modern naval power. Their radars scanned the sky, their missiles waited in silence, and their crews trusted that technology would give them the edge. On paper, it should have been an uneven fight. Modern ships against outdated aircraft. Sophisticated systems against pilots, relying on eyesight and instinct. But war rarely follows logic. In the next few minutes, decisions made in seconds would expose the limits of technology, the brutal cost of hesitation, and the terrifying power of low-altitude attack. One ship would be lost, dozens of lives would be changed forever, and a single question would echo long after the smoke cleared. In modern warfare, when machines fail, what truly decides the outcome? The battle that unfolded on the 25th of May, 1982, did not begin in the air. It began weeks earlier, with a political gamble that reshaped the South Atlantic into a battlefield. Argentina's seizure of the Falkland Islands was swift, decisive, and rooted in national pride. But holding the islands was another matter entirely. Once Britain committed to retaking them, the conflict became a race against time, distance, and logistics. For Argentina, the problem was clear. British naval power controlled the seas, shielding landing forces and strangling supply routes. As long as those warships remained intact, any hope of maintaining control over the islands would steadily erode. The only viable answer lay in the air. The aircraft assigned to that task were far from ideal. The A-4 Skyhawk was an aging design, reliable but outdated, lacking radar, electronic countermeasures, or missile warning systems. Against modern surface-to-air missiles, survival depended not on technology, but on discipline, precision, and courage. Argentine pilots trained relentlessly for low-level attack, flying so close to land and sea that even minor errors could prove fatal. The British task force, by contrast, represented modern naval doctrine. Advanced radars, layered missile defenses, and highly trained crews formed a shield intended to make aerial attack prohibitively costly. Destroyers and frigates were positioned to protect ground forces and create overlapping fields of fire. Confidence in the system was strong, reinforced by earlier successes against Argentine aircraft. On the morning of May 25, intelligence reports warned of increased enemy activity. British commanders knew attacks were likely, but uncertainty clouded the details. Where would the strike fall? From what direction? And how many aircraft would make it through? As the Argentine jets lifted off, the atmosphere in their cockpits was tense but focused. Orders were short, precise, and absolute. There would be no climbing, no deviation, no hesitation. Terrain would be their ally, hiding them from radar until the final moments. The islands themselves, rugged and broken, offered narrow corridors where aircraft could slip through unseen. Across the water, British crews moved to heightened readiness. Radar operators scanned their screens. Missile systems stood ready. Alarms could sound at any second. The men aboard the ships trusted their equipment, but experience had taught them that trust did not guarantee certainty. Both sides understood what was at stake. For Argentina, success meant a chance to hold the islands longer, to force political pressure and negotiation. For Britain, failure could cost lives, ships, and momentum in a war fought thousands of miles from home. As the distance closed and the first radar contacts flickered into view, preparation gave way to action. What followed would test not only weapons and machines, but the limits of human decision-making under fire. The approach was silent in a way that felt unnatural for combat aircraft. Flying so low that the sea spray coated their canopies, the Argentine pilots used the islands as a shield, slipping beneath the reach of British radar. Every ridge, every rise in the terrain mattered. One careless climb, one unnecessary correction, and the mission would end before it truly began. On board HMS Coventry, radar operators suddenly saw what they had been trained to fear. Multiple contacts appeared, low and fast. The alarm was instant. Orders echoed through the ship as missile systems flew toward the threat. The crew had practiced this scenario countless times. This was what the ship was built for. Then the contacts vanished. The disappearance was worse than confirmation. The aircraft had slipped behind the landmass of Pebble Island, dropping below the radar horizon. For the captain, it was the most dangerous moment of all. The long-range missiles now had only a narrow window in which they could fire, and that window was closing fast. In the Argentine cockpit, the sea rushed by at terrifying speed. There were no warning tones, no electronic cues, only the visual confirmation of two grey shapes on the horizon. British warships, real targets. The order came without drama. The attack had begun. Back aboard Coventry. Confusion compounded danger. A British Harrier reported in, entering the same airspace as the incoming attackers. Friendly and hostile aircraft now occupied the same narrow slice of sky. The decision was immediate and irreversible. Missiles were authorized. The Harrier was ordered clear, but the technology hesitated. The Sea Dart system struggled to lock onto targets flying just feet above the waves. Each second stretched unbearably as the attackers closed the distance. Crew members watched the radar screens, willing the systems to respond. Nothing came. The missiles refused to take hold. Hope shifted to HMS Broadsword, positioned nearby with shorter-range Seawolf missiles designed for precisely this kind of engagement. On her screens, the incoming aircraft appeared as a single merged contact, too close together for the system to resolve properly. When the signal finally split into two, the guidance logic failed entirely. There was no time to reset. Lookouts now saw the attackers with the naked eye. Shouts rang out across the deck. Guns opened fire. Tracers streaked toward the onrushing aircraft as sailors fired with anything that could reach the sky. The air filled with noise, smoke, and desperate motion. Inside the jets, the pilots saw flashes and splashes around them as shells struck the water. The ships were impossibly close now, filling the windscreen. One quick decision followed another. Targets were adjusted, triggers were squeezed. In those final seconds, doctrine collapsed into instinct. Machines faltered, men acted. The outcome of the engagement would hinge not on design specifications, but on courage, timing, and a handful of irreversible choices made at terrifying speed. The final attack unfolded in seconds, but its consequences would last a lifetime. As the Argentine jets tore through the curtain of gunfire, the defenders aboard HMS Coventry did everything training and instinct allowed. Heavy guns thundered, smaller weapons joined in. Sailors fired from exposed positions, fully aware that each second gained might save the ship. It was not enough. At near point-blank range, the attacking aircraft opened fire. Cannon rounds raked the deck and superstructure, tearing through antennae, railings, and exposed equipment. Then the bombs fell. They struck the hull with a dull, almost hollow impact, an unsettling sound that suggested failure rather than destruction. For a brief moment, there was hope. The bombs did not explode immediately. Men began to rise from cover, confused, stunned, unsure whether they had survived through luck or miracle. Damage reports started to come in, fragmented and incomplete, as smoke spread through the compartments below. Then the ship convulsed. Two massive explosions ripped through the hull in rapid succession. One detonated near the operation spaces, obliterating command and control in an instant. The other ignited a catastrophic fire in the engine room, severing power and propulsion. The effects were immediate and overwhelming. The ship lost electricity. Communications went dead. The deck tilted sharply as water rushed in. Inside the smoke-filled corridors, survival became a personal battle. Visibility dropped to nothing. Screams echoed through steel passageways as wounded sailors searched for exits. Fire spread unchecked, feeding on fuel and wiring. The destroyer, once a symbol of control and precision, had become a burning listing wreck. Yet even in disaster, discipline held. Evacuation procedures began almost instinctively. Sailors helped one another through smoke and flame, dragging the injured, distributing life jackets, launching rafts. There was no panic, only urgency. Training took over where orders could no longer reach. The commanding officer emerged onto the deck to find his crew already acting. The ship continued to roll, the angle growing more severe with each passing minute. When the order to abandon ship was finally given, it was executed with grim efficiency. In the cold waters of the South Atlantic, survivors clung to rafts as rescue helicopters and nearby vessels moved in. In total, 170 men would be pulled from the sea. 19 never made it out. Above them, the Argentine pilots turned for home. They had struck a powerful blow and survived an attack few believed possible. But even as smoke rose from the sinking destroyer, the larger reality remained unchanged. The loss of one ship, however dramatic, would not decide the war. What it did decide was something else entirely. It exposed the fragile boundary between control and chaos at sea, and the terrible human cost paid when that boundary is crossed. The sinking of HMS Coventry was not merely a tactical loss. To naval planners around the world, especially in the United States, it was a warning shot. Far from the battlefields of Europe or the Pacific, the South Atlantic had revealed uncomfortable truths about modern naval warfare. For the US Navy and its NATO allies, the Falklands War became a live case study. American analysts quickly recognized that the engagement exposed a critical vulnerability. Sophisticated warships, optimized for high-altitude threats, were dangerously exposed to low-flying attackers willing to trade survivability for surprise. The Argentine pilots had exploited radar horizons, minimum missile engagement ranges, and the complexity of coordinating layered defenses under real combat stress. This was not a failure of courage or professionalism. It was a systemic problem. U.S. after-action assessments emphasized how quickly command and control could degrade once a ship was saturated with fast, low-altitude targets. The confusion aboard the British ships, friendly aircraft sharing airspace with attackers, missile systems masking each other's firing arcs, mirrored scenarios American commanders feared in a potential Cold War naval clash. Technology, it became clear, could overwhelm its own operators when seconds mattered. One immediate lesson was the necessity of redundancy at close range. The Falklands reinforced American investment in point defense systems such as close-in weapon systems and faster reacting missile batteries. It also accelerated changes in doctrine, better integration between ships, clearer rules for airspace control, and greater emphasis on decentralized decision-making when centralized systems failed. Globally, smaller navies drew a different but equally sobering lesson. Falklands demonstrated that even modest air forces, if well-trained and aggressively employed, could challenge first-rate naval powers. This realization reshaped procurement priorities across the world, from anti-ship munitions to low-altitude strike training. Politically, the loss of Coventry hardened British resolve, rather than weakening it. In Washington, it reinforced support for Allied naval modernization and validated long-standing concerns about missile-age saturation attacks. The battle became a reference point in war colleges, staff briefings, and naval exercises for decades to come. What lingered most, however, was not a diagram or a doctrine. It was the reminder that naval warfare remains an unforgiving contest between human judgment and mechanical limits. When systems falter, outcomes hinge on preparation, adaptability, and the willingness to act decisively under fire. The loss of HMS Coventry was a moment of shock, but it was not a turning point in the war itself. Britain pressed on, adapting quickly, absorbing the blow, and ultimately prevailing in the broader campaign. Strategically, the conflict's outcome would be decided elsewhere, but historically, the meaning of that day ran far deeper than victory or defeat. For Argentina, the attack represented both triumph and tragedy. The pilots proved that skill, discipline, and daring could overcome overwhelming technological odds. Flying outdated aircraft into one of the most heavily defended naval environments of the era, they succeeded where logic said they should fail. Yet their success came at immense personal risk, and it could not reverse the strategic imbalance that defined the war. For Britain, the sinking was a painful lesson paid for in lives. 19 sailors never returned home. Their loss was not the result of incompetence or cowardice, but of warfare evolving faster than doctrine could adapt. The professionalism displayed during the evacuation, the calm execution of duty amid fire and smoke, became part of the ship's enduring legacy. In the years that followed, naval powers around the world studied the battle in detail. The engagement reshaped how modern fleets thought about air defense, redundancy, and human decision-making under pressure. It reminded strategists that technology does not remove uncertainty from war, it merely changes its form. Machines can extend reach and speed, but they cannot replace judgment when seconds determine survival. The Falklands conflict is often remembered as a distant, limited war. Yet its lessons remain uncomfortably relevant. Low-cost weapons can threaten high-value platforms. Small decisions can have irreversible consequences. And even in an age of sensors and algorithms, war remains deeply human. Today, the wreck of Coventry rests silently beneath the South Atlantic, far from headlines and doctrine manuals. But its story endures not as a symbol of failure, but as a reminder of the price paid when theory meets reality. So the question remains, as naval warfare grows ever more automated, have we truly learned how to balance technology with the fragile, irreplaceable element of human judgment? Or are we simply trusting new machines to make the same old mistakes? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. And if you value the lessons history leaves behind, consider joining us as we explore the battles that continue to shape the world we live in.